This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. All right, so we've made it into Fort Point. This is a war station, of course, that was placed to defend the bay from attacks from the Navy. And it is just gorgeous inside of here. And luckily, I was talking to the guards and they said, hey, come out the back door and let's get filming. So here we are. But you know what? I don't think I gave you guys a proper introduction to this film stock. So let me kind of give you a rundown on what it is and my plan with shooting it today. So ladies and gentlemen, this film right here is a brand new film stock from Harman Photo called Harman Phoenix ISO 200 color film. Now, like I said, I have had a couple of rolls. I only shot it once in Hawaii. It didn't turn out right. And what I found was I ended up just overexposing the heck out of it. So one thing I think you guys should note about this film stock is that Harman says it's a variable ISO film. So you can shoot this at 100 ISO, 200, and 400 ISO. At least that is what Harman is telling us. Now, being that it is a brand new emulsion, a brand new chemistry, we don't know exactly how it's gonna turn out. But from my experience, the first thing I've noticed was that it just can get a little too contrasty. So with that said, we are gonna be bracketing our photographs today. I'm gonna be shooting this at 100 ISO, 200 ISO, as well as 400 ISO. I'm gonna share the results with you guys to kind of see which one looks the best. And that is really my goal. I wanna figure out what ISO is the best to shoot this at because my first experience with it just wasn't all too great. Now with that said, I am gonna be shooting with my trusty Nikon F3. The plan is we're gonna load this up, probably gonna sit on this bench here. We're gonna shoot it again, each photograph at 100, 200, and 400 ISO. And we are gonna explore this beautiful, beautiful historical site here in San Francisco and make some photographs. So let's load the camera up and then let's get going. First impressions, man, I really do like the artwork on it. Check this out, you guys. This is the film stock in all of its glory, kind of similar to the box here, but the film back looks a little weird. It's like this yellow color. Very interesting. All right, so for this first photograph, I'm kind of liking this nice diagonal with the crazy light right here. Now, I mentioned this is a very contrasty film, so why not pick a contrasty scene to start with? We're gonna start off with 100 ISO, and it's giving us a reading of, if I was shooting at like f8, let's say, f8 1/125th, all right? All right, let's see. So we have this, let's do a photo here without the human element. 28 millimeters is just wide enough to get that flag and that watchtower in place. 3, 2, and 1. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, that is what you call I ran out of a battery. Oh my goodness. You gotta be kidding me, you guys. I ran out of a freaking battery and I don't have any replacements. Well, so either my camera is dead or it's on really low battery. It's basically not firing. So, that freaking sucks, man. It's gonna make this controlled experiment way harder. But luckily, you guys, the F3 comes with a mechanical shutter of 1/60th of a second. So I'm gonna have to use a light meter app to kind of adjust my exposures here and there. This day just keeps getting better and better. But thankfully, the F3 does have a mechanical exposure. So I am going to use that 1/60th of a second. That is gonna be my set shutter speed. And let's pray for the best, man. Hopefully we can make a good photograph today. And I'm still gonna try to bracket, so let's see how that goes. So this scene right here is reading us 1/60th f14. Let's try that out. All right, here we go. In 3, 2, and 1. Okay. At 100 ISO, this is exactly what I was expecting. This was metered for the average of the shadows and highlights of the scene, which were about a 2 to 3 stop difference. First thing I noticed was how the latitude of this film was somewhat limited, and this was consistent with the role I shot in Hawaii, where I noticed contrasty scenes where the 2 stop or more difference ended up being very contrasty. That's f11. Let's bracket that. Now we are gonna go to f16. All right, so f16 at 1/60th of a second. Same photograph, different exposure. We are gonna be doing this at 200 ISO. All great things come with adversity, ladies and gentlemen. It's just one of those times. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, 200 ISO. Okay. And then let's try 400 ISO now. So you go F22, 160th of a second on the bracket. 3, 2, and 1. Dude, get out of my frame, please. 3, 2, 1. All right. That, my friends, is a successful bracket with our limited 1/60th of a second shutter. Okay, looking back at these photos, I think for sure the best looking image from this set came from 400 ISO. But it's important to note this was a very contrasty scene where there were deep shadows and bright highlights. Looking back at these photographs, I wish I had chosen a subject that had much more even light, because my samples from Hawaii that were in less contrasty scenes turned out pretty okay, if you ask me. So here's the deal. I'm gonna go explore this place. I'm gonna make some more photographs, but my camera battery is at 20%, so I don't think I'm gonna be showing you guys every single spot that I'm gonna be making a photo of, but rather I will just be kind of going through quickly, and then we're gonna come back home and talk a little bit about my results. So. Now, despite this being marketed as a variable ISO film, I think what's most important is that you photograph with this film stock in even light. Because of this film stock's latitude, it seems as if you need to be spot on with your exposure and shoot in more even light to attain the best possible results. And speaking of attaining the best results, one of the best ways to set yourself apart as a photographer in 2024 is to create your own photography website. And this leads us over into our sponsor for this episode, the good folks over at Squarespace. Squarespace is your all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. It's time to level up your game and create your own photography website. With Squarespace's award-winning drag and drop templates, you can get started within minutes. You can create pages for an e-commerce shop, a portfolio or gallery, and probably one of my newest favorite features, the appointment scheduling tab, which allows your clients to see what time slots you have available and book you directly through your website, saving you and your clients any confusion. It's time you start your own website today. Head over to squarespace.com/kingjapes and enter promo code kingjapes at checkout, and you guys can receive 10% off of your first purchase of a domain or a website. Huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's episode. We found a nice contrasty scene. This one looks pretty good. I'm gonna try to make this before people start coming up those stairs here, but this is really gonna test the dynamic range, I feel like, and just the latitude. There's a lot of nice shadow here. I'm exposing for the mid-tone, so 3, 2, 1. Hopefully it turns out well. The first shot was 3.5, 1/60th of a second. At 200 ISO, it's gonna be 5.6, so we are gonna adjust for that. Here we go, in 3, 2, and 1. And try one more time here at f8, and this should be 400 ISO film here, so 3, 2, and 1. All right, hopefully they turned out. We got a nice little subframe here of this watchtower. I just checked my exposure. I'm supposed to be at f8, 1/60th of a second. And we're gonna come down a little bit here, double subframe in 3, 2, and 1. Boom. And let's bracket that once more. 1, 2, and 3. Gorgeous. Alright guys, so we are on top of Fort Point. Look at the seagulls right there, man. 360 view of the area right here. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fire off the last frames that we have from this roll. Just gonna shoot everything f16 at 1/60th of a second here. Hopefully it turns out well, you guys. So running out of battery, running out of time, and I'm gonna get this photograph of this ferry, or shipping container, I should say, in the background. So I'll see you guys in a second. Alright, so I have a lot to say about this film, so let's just get right into it. First order of business, I actually was able to test Phoenix 200 pretty early on before the release date, but held off on dropping the review because initially I wasn't too impressed with my results. These are a few of the photographs I made with this film stock in Hawaii a few months ago in October, and after getting the scans back, I thought maybe I somehow just shot it incorrectly, as some of my peers seem to be getting much better results than my own. After photographing with it in this episode though, and getting nearly the same results, I think I have finally come up with my conclusion on Harman Phoenix 200.
Can you edit it so it looks good?
Based on my test, I found this film stock to be tricky, but when shot right, can be pretty cool. The reason why I wasn't getting good results in Hawaii is because the scenes I chose to photograph were all way too contrasty. This film performs best when shot in nice and even light across the frame. Next up would be the orange and warm tones of this film. I found it to be pretty overpowering at times, making me reluctant to use it for portraits. I see this film being popular amongst photographers documenting urban landscapes, maybe even street photography, just as long as the light is right. Where I really feel like this film may perform well would be during overcast days where the clouds act as a softbox, giving you nice and even light. In terms of grain, considering it is a 200 ISO film, it is fairly grainy. Underexposed or not, there is noticeable grain, which is a look some people crave, but also a look that not many people are a fan of. I personally don't mind it, as I plan to shoot with this film stock with the intention of showing the use of the grain, kind of like for a certain aesthetic, but it may deter some people away, especially if this is their first time using a film stock that's 200 ISO with a high grain structure. Another point worth mentioning, folks, is the halation you get from the highlights. A lot of images seem to have this glow effect that you typically see on movie and cine films like Vision 3 500T. Again, this could be used as a stylistic choice for aesthetics, but can also be perceived as a negative. I personally am not a huge fan of this, but in some photographs like this where the light is the main focus and subject, I believe it does add a nice little dramatic effect. Lastly, let's talk about what ISO to shoot it at. Whether you shoot it at 100, 200, or 400 ISO, you need to nail your exposure. The latitude on this film stock is actually pretty small, so you need to be able to be within at least one stop, maybe even a half stop, similar to like shooting with slide film. I found that any time that my exposure was off by 1 or even 2 stops, it almost looks like a pushed film stock, where the contrast was just really strong, shadows turned out to be really dark, and the highlights were just overexposed. It's hard to say what's the best ISO to shoot at, and so my advice would be to shoot it at box speed and just make sure you nail your exposures to be within that 1 stop range. And now comes the verdict. Would I recommend this film stock? Simple answer is yes. Yes, I would. It may not be the most clinical film on the market, and it may not have the best latitude, but Harman Phoenix 200 is the first new color film to be produced in a very long time from scratch. It's not perfect, but it definitely has potential, and I believe certain styles of photography could benefit from shooting this film stock. One of those, again, being urban landscapes with sort of like a dystopian feel. I wouldn't recommend this film for traditional portraits, traditional landscapes. I don't think it's going to give you the most accurate color, but I can see it being used for things like experimental portraits, experimental landscapes, similar to some of the looks that you would see from Lomo films. So even though it isn't a perfect film stock, I do believe it is a film worth trying out. That's going to wrap it up for this episode, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. As always, this has been King Japes, Minolta Gang.